So a big hello to all the viewers. Welcome again to the DLife.in channel. I am Shashikant Iyengar, the host today. I am also a DLife.in member and a volunteer. And for all those who are watching this program, this is not a medical or a nutrition advice. It's just sharing of information. People are requested to take the guidance of the doctors and the nutritionists for any change. There are also no financials attached to the session. All are free of cost. DLife.in is a community platform for low carbers. It's a platform for those who are suffering from diabetes, obesity, PCOS, and other metabolic syndrome. DLife has over 2,250 success stories, and they also have more than 1,200 low carb dishes on the site. DLife was developed by Anup Singh, who is an engineer from IIT. Recently, Anup Singh and DLife has been recognized and awarded as icons of India by Outlook magazine for pioneering low carb in India. They also launched a diploma course recently so that people can take advantage of it and help others. So viewers, today we have a very, very special guest from New York. We have Antonio Martinez, or you can call him Tony in short. Tony, yes. Welcome to DLife platform.
It's truly an honor to be with you and your community. I feel like, we are brothers and sisters, this community all across the world, because we're all dealing with this issue of how to manage our type 2 diabetes in a way that you have control over it instead of it having control over you. And that's been the wonderful gift of using a low-carb dietary approach, whether it's low-carb, full ketogenic, or carnivorous approach. It is an option that literally can give you back control of your life and free you from all the pharmaceuticals that unfortunately do not resolve the underlying process, the disease process. It just, it's a symptomatic based treatment. And I'm not saying that low carb or keto is the cure either, but all things considered, it's a lot less expensive and a lot more pleasurable to be eating instead of taking your pills to deal with this condition. So I'm really, again, thrilled. I hope I have the honor and the privilege to visit your country and your countrymen in the future. And there needs to be a conference, a live conference with so many people and so many people suffering. And especially now with the whole situation we have with COVID, where we learn that people who are metabolically unhealthy have the most difficult experiences with COVID, and the most severe cases come from it. So we have to fight the ignorance and the arrogance that is in the environment that keeps us from really doing better. And we can do better. And I'm confident we will do better.
So, so before we proceed ahead, Tony, let me have the pleasure of introducing Tony. So Antonio Martinez, or Tony as is known to his friend, is a 57-year-old attorney in the US based out of New York. He is a type 2 diabetic in remission through a ketogenic carnivorous diet coming up on the last 7 years this July. He is also a heart attack survivor for over 7 years. He is a patient advocate, public health policy expert, and a prolific public speaker, having worked on changing a number of health and food related laws in US. So he was also a candidate for New York State Senate last year, but withdrew due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Tony, welcome to India virtually.
Thank you, as we say.
So we have Namaste, and we have interacted so much over Twitter, over Facebook. Today, I'm really thrilled to have my friend here, and I'm really thrilled to talk to him live. And it is something which both of us have wished for quite a long time. And you also had expressed your desire to come to India. but I think all this pandemic situation is going to delay it for quite some time.
Unfortunately, but I'll get there. I know I'll get there soon enough. I mean, the wonderful thing about this community is we truly are a global community, because I met you and Anup through just this network that we have that literally spans the entire globe. Because despite whatever cultural, language, whatever the differences are, we have a lot in common, and we're all being creative and challenging to manage and, again, get control over this condition that is destroying our lives and the lives of our loved ones. And you know, it's so important to be a motivated patient, an educated patient, to ask questions, to be curious, to be always exploring and, you know, testing so that you can find out what actually works for you. Because I'm going to say, I am simply sharing my experience. I'm not saying that this has to be the experience for everyone else, but there is information that you can take from my experience that you can discuss with your doctor or nutritionist or, you know, your loved ones, and figure out, you know, what to do so that you can have a better outcome.
So Tony, just briefly, you know, though I introduce you, just briefly tell us your background, you know, what we're doing, and something about your, you know, your heart attack issue, and, you know, how you actually
Sure.
progressed later on.
So like as you said, I'm 57 years old. I've been a practicing attorney now for 25 years. I'm based out of New York, although I also work from Washington, D.C. and New Jersey, and sometimes I do some immigration work, and that is kind of covers the whole country. But my classic training as a lawyer is in the area of food and drug law, where I was involved in the early 90s with changing, amending the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act to allow a separate regulatory category for nutritional supplements, dietary supplements. And I've always been interested in the subject of health and nutrition and all of that. In fact, my dear friends and loved ones always said that I should have been a doctor instead of an attorney, but I'm an advocate. I love people, and I love advocating for patients' rights, and I see this as just an extension of that. And my personal story, I come from a family that is genetically predisposed to type 2 diabetes. My late father had type 2 diabetes. My mother, who is going to be 86 years old this September, has type 2 diabetes. And other relatives on both sides of the family have had it. And we've struggled with, my parents immigrated to the United States from the Dominican Republic. And I was born and educated in New York. And throughout my life, I've struggled with both weight, being overweight, never quite, slightly, there were times where I could say I was obese, but always dealing with weight issues, and never really understanding or figuring out what was the real problem. I had an inkling of it when I had the privilege in the 90s to work with the late Dr. Robert Atkins, who is one of the pioneers and fathers of low carb in the United States. And he was a brilliant man, and very charismatic, and very courageous. And so I got an experience from working with Bob. And unfortunately, in April of 2003, at that time I was living in Washington. I was going to be his man in Washington and work to get more work done on low carb. I remember him coining the term diabesity. He showed me his PowerPoint slide at the time, and he was so eager to get out in front and talk about the connection between diabetes and obesity, because something that they don't tell any of us, but really diabetes is an energy disease, is an energy management disease. If you can understand that as a diabetic, your ability to manage, store, and process energy are affected, then the way you think about the energy source changes. So you have to look at foods differently than the way that people are trained. People are trained to look at food based on consumer models, like what tastes good, what's the most delicious. For the food manufacturers, what can they sell more and more and more and more of the same, without regard to whatever the consequences. But anyway, I've deviated. Let me get back to my story. So I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes around that time, 2002, 2003. And I was following all of the recommendations. And I saw that by 2008, I had progressed from metformin to Janomet. And still, I thought, everything was fine, that, hey, I had my A1C was in the sixes, and just this kind of like benign neglect by the doctors. Like, okay, this is the way it's going to be. And it's just, and eventually, if it gets worse, we'll put you on insulin, and just this cascade of medicine without saying, hey, stop doing what you're doing. You can't handle certain foods metabolically like healthy people can. Stop it, change it, alter it. And in the month of March 2014, I was away on a business trip. I was in Puerto Rico at the time. And I remember having just an awful the combination of what was nausea, but also I had felt like a pain in my chest that wouldn't go away. I felt miserable. Felt like someone had put a rock beneath the sternum, and I just didn't feel right, and I knew something was really wrong. And I called up a buddy of mine because I wasn't in a condition to drive myself home from the airport. And I told my friend, listen, I need to be picked up and I need to be taken to the emergency room. And actually, this was the beginning of Obamacare. And I had this health insurance plan, and I had the best plan. And I said, no. He and my friend said, no, we'll take you to then. He said, no, we got to go to this hospital. And I called up the airlines, and I rebooked my ticket to the first flight out of San Juan. And the moment I arrived, we went to the emergency room, and I was immediately admitted. And the cardiologist who was attending the emergency room at the time, who is still my cardiologist today, she looks at me and she says, "You're a very lucky man, Mr. Martinez." I said, "God is smiling on you, because, if you waited any longer, you'd probably you would be dead." Said, we've got to get you stabilized. You've been in a state of with a heart attack, not the TV or movie that we see where you see the person collapse, but just this blockage that ultimately will lead to the patient's death if that blockage is not opened up. And they administered nitroglycerin and heparin, and they opened me up, and they transported me to another hospital where I had a stent placement in one artery, and then I was sent home about 2 days after that. And then when you survive, and the other thing that I remembered being at the hospital was the food. I was at one of New York's top hospitals, but the food was absolutely garbage. It was all carb, it was carb overloaded, and they did not give me any medication. I was hyperglycemic throughout this whole period while I was in the hospital. And I was like, what is going on? Why aren't they giving me salmon or almonds or a nice salad with olive oil? No, it was, all of this horrible food, hospital food. It was just awful. And so when I was finally discharged and went home, when you survive a heart attack, you have, when you're going through it, you have moments where like you go, oh my God, I could die. I could have died. And, you feel blessed that you're able to talk with your loved ones. And I talked, my son, who was on the way home from spring break from college, drove straight to the hospital, and the family and everybody trying to figure out. So, you kind of reassess, my goodness, I'm being given a second chance, and grateful to, I'm a religious person. I believe in God. And so I was grateful to God that I've been given a second chance. And you think about what you're going to do with that. And then I was really disturbed by the fact that the doctors, or my healthcare regimen as a type 2 diabetic, was just one of progression. No intervention, no doctor talked to me about, well, here's ways that you can decrease your medication or improve your profile, and that, as well as I said, there is something terribly wrong with the system that allows this to happen. And there's something terribly wrong with hospitals that can provide state-of-the-art 21st century medicine, but provide just horrible, awful nutrition to patients. So I began to think about Dr. Atkins, and I watched a documentary called Serial Killers. Now, it's not serial killers like, the criminal who was killing. They were talking about cereal grains. They say, and when I watched that, which basically is a documentary that talks about the low carb experience of an Olympic class runner, and the great Dr. and Professor Noakes from South Africa, everything clicked. And I said, I had my aha moment. I said, I'm going to do this. And immediately went on a ketogenic diet in July of 2014. And my primary care physician at the time said, oh, Tony, that's very risky. He didn't tell me not to do it. I thought that was interesting. He said, that's very risky. Your cholesterol is going to go up. I said, listen, I'm not going to be on this perpetual path of all this medication for the rest of my life. So I went on it. He said, well, we're going to have to test and make sure that everything's all right. I said, fine, let's test. So I get tested. I do a set of metabolics in September of 2014. And then I get a phone call from my doctor, and he says to me, and I remember this because he says, Tony, what are you doing? I said, well, doctor, I'm not following any of the recommendations that you guys have got. I'm actually I'm eating these foods. And actually, I'm no longer eating 3 meals a day. I'm not hungry. I'm only eating 2 meals a day or 1 meal a day just because I'm not hungry. He goes, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because I'm happy to say that you have a normal A1C. Congratulations. He says, I can take you off Janomet. And if you keep this up, I can take you off metformin within a year's time. I said, hallelujah. And then I decided that I would take my experience and apply it both as a patient and as an attorney in the public policy arena. I noticed a lot of these conferences and organizations, they're either all health practitioners and or patients. I think I may be the only one, or just a handful of public policy folks who are trying to look at what is going on in the law and what is going on in our policies to change that, to change the status quo. We are on an unsustainable path if we maintain the status quo. This disease will destroy us and bankrupt us. It already is doing it. And then, in my own personal experience, I noticed that the average cost for diabetes in the United States averages about $500 a month for type 2 diabetic in terms of the cost of the prescription drugs. Now, if you do the math, like in my case, 7 years now, off of an average cost basis of $500 a month or $6,000 a year, the savings that I've saved to both my insurance company and out of pocket is over $40,000. Now, I know pharma doesn't like that because that I've taken away. I mean, I was kidding around that in September of 2014, I stopped contributing to the $20+ million salary of the CEO of Merck because I was off Janomet. And the good news is that the money that you save on this, now you can use that money to buy higher quality food. You lose weight, so you get to buy a new wardrobe. You just, you have more money to enjoy life instead of worrying about how am I going to pay my prescription drug bills and where am I going to get all these meals and everything. And the other thing that is economically challenging to the status quo is, I eat real food. I try to avoid as much as possible anything that's packaged. Now, you can't do it 100%, but, it's a very simple formula. I don't, so, well, what do you do, Tony? And I go, well, I don't eat anything with sugar. I don't eat anything with grains. I avoid grains completely. I mean, grains, unfortunately, especially if you're type 2 diabetic, if you eat wheat, rice, oats, anything, it's just going to blow your blood sugar. If you're type 2 diabetic, you just don't have the capacity to handle that kind of energy surge. And then I've avoided all vegetable oils because I've come to the conclusion at this moment that the high omega-6 content of vegetable oils lend themselves to being very disruptive to having an anti-inflammatory profile. You want, as a type 2 diabetic, to do two things key. You want to achieve normal blood sugars, and two, you want to have an anti-inflammatory profile. And so you do that by avoiding the foods that inflame you. And I know that I'm on the right track because something that I've done, since the heart attack, I took what's called a coronary arterial calcification test, which is short CAC scan, and it determines the level and location of coronary plaque that is calcified on the walls of your arteries. And when I did this, clearly I saw in my case where I had the stent placed, they don't look at that scan. They don't look at that area. They look at the other areas of the heart. And there's an area of the heart that's called the widowmaker, and it's the
LAD.
It's the LAD artery, and I was developing plaque there, and I had a score of 39, and I followed a protocol. There is a gentleman named Patrick Thea, who is an engineer.
Theot's protocol.
Yes. And Patrick's one of the smartest people that I've met. I've made so many intelligent people. Another brilliant man who's become a dear friend is Ivor Cummins from Ireland. These people, it's like really the engineer's mind that deep dives this science and starts thinking creatively. Well, like, how do we reverse engineer this disease process? Where are the steps that we can kind of interrupt the cascade? And following a protocol that Patrick is used on himself to reverse his own coronary arterial calcification. I've been tracking it now, going on 2 years. Last year was the second year following this protocol. And in the same artery, instead of having progression of coronary plaque, which what my cardiologist was expecting, I actually had a decrease of 7 points. It went from 39 down to 32,
Wow.
which isn't, I mean, listen, I'm not saying that, I've had debates with a doctor whether that's reversal, but the point is, I can say there hasn't been any progression.
Yeah.
And, there's another saying that my friend Ivor Cummins, who has a great website called thefatemperor.com, you want to put out the fire that's inside your body. That's the first step. So if you have diabetes, if you have heart disease, right, you want to put out the internal fire that's going on, because if you don't, eventually you will burn out. It will get to you, and it game over. So these are the steps that you can do, certainly with a low carb or ketogenic or even carnivorous diet. And I understand and I respect that the tradition in India is vegetarian. But I will say that I do know that it is possible to do both keto, vegetarian, and also to do low carb vegetarian. For me, following my ketogenic, which is basically carnivore, which is basically 90% carnivorous, 10%, I'll occasionally have a green salad or a vegetable, but I basically will eat fish and meat. So far, so good. I want to empower other patients to get informed and to take charge of their health, and to use it as an opportunity to make it as an adventure, because some of the other good things that come out of this is my friends and loved ones have told me, wow, Tony, you've become a really good cook. I've become a keto chef, because especially with the pandemic, there was a time that I had not even been to a restaurant in a year. And so literally the most important places in your home is obviously your bedroom where you sleep, and the kitchen where you eat. And then, you have to get your exercise and the sleep and all of these other things, because it's a combination of all of these factors. So that's kind of an overview of my personal experience so far.
So, Tony, very, very interesting to know. There's something which I never knew, that is your background about your expertise on food and supplement. It's something I thought you were more on immigration. If, reading all your Facebook posts, I thought that was where your expertise lies. But it's surprising to know, yes.
Well, I'll give you the backstory on the immigration part. I come from a family of lawyers. My late father was the first Dominican American member of the New York State Bar. He was sworn in December of 1956. He immigrated to the United States as a boy, served in World War II, and has the classic American story that you hear about. And he was an immigration lawyer. And my work is just basically out of love and respect to that tradition. I'm a person who would like the government whatever aspect of it to work for people. I get frustrated when the government fails or breaks down or is not doing what it's supposed to in terms of serving the public. So immigration is an extension of that. But I mean, my passion, my love is this science, this food stuff. I mean, and so I was one of the principal lobbyists for a law called the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994. So I was right there in the beginning, putting it all together, running around Capitol Hill, talking to the senators and the congressmen and all the politics and all of that. And I was also involved with the FDA Modernization Act and Reform Act of 1997, because I represented as an attorney a group of cancer patients that wanted to get access to experimental medications, and the FDA process was so cumbersome and so burdensome, and was trying to make it easier for patients to have access to new treatments. So all of this stuff interests me a great deal, and only because at the time now, my young son at that time, who's now a grown-up son, and actually I moved back to the New York, New Jersey area to be closer to him, so while he was growing up in his adolescence and going to college. But I've always been a guy who's been in New York and Washington, and then someone who loves to travel internationally. So, you know, I'm looking forward when you have one of these real conferences in India, and I can come out and we can talk about how we can make the government work and have more intelligent policies. We have to do something about this, because this is devastating. This disease is devastating our countries and our economies. And we have to think a lot smarter about how we could be using food, as Hippocrates told us, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. So
very interesting. And I also never knew that you had met Atkins, and probably you are one of those few lucky people who have actually met Atkins and followed him. And very, very interesting to know. Yes, by stopping the medication, yes, you're not contributing to that hefty salary. Yes, and and that's how all of us are. I mean, we are also pillless, and we also don't contribute to the salaries. And very interestingly, what you told was, we are treating food as an entertainment. We are not treating food as a
right.
nutrition. If you're going to treat as an entertainment, you want to get entertained 2-3 times a day, 5 times a day, 6 times a day, and that's what's happening. People want to get entertained 5 to 6 times a day, and in that bargain, they are going to mess up with themselves.
Well, you bring up a good point about pharma. I'd like pharma to be more focused on drug discovery and development, and look at the ways that we could make that easier. But what has happened now is, because diabetes and these chronic conditions are so profitable, we have, just generations and generations of the same type of drugs doing the same thing, but never getting at the root cause. I would like drug companies to be working on getting at the root cause and solution to insulin resistance, which is the root cause of our diabetes problem to begin with. And there's not that focus.
I think
there's only like, what's going to be the next version of, SGLT diabetes drugs? We have to change the incentives and be more responsive to that.
But
so,
Tony,
and
if
again,
if you see, the root cause lies in food again. If you see insulin resistance, it basically comes from, we are having excess of energy intake, and maybe excess of this PUF oil, which can independently cause insulin resistance. And so, and what's interesting is what you're told about the CT calcium scoring. So in India, this is known as CT calcium scoring, which is a simple test which is available just for, I think, for the viewers, around 5.5 to 7,500 rupees, very easily in any of the CT scan center, and one of the earliest indicator of heart disease. And again, very nice to know that you have managed to either arrest the progression of calcification or even reduced to some extent. And yes, if you really watch Ivor Cummins' video and his blogs, if you read, that's what he mentions. Even if you're able to arrest this progression, that itself is a big thing. Forget about reversal. Yeah, if you get
Yes, put out
reversal,
the fire.
yeah,
Put
put
out
out
the
the fire.
fire.
And Theod protocol, yes, personally, I also seen it's very, very interesting. And this person has spent thousands of hours reading all the PubMed. Literally, I can call him a PubMed warrior. And yes, develop this protocol. And in fact, this protocol is there even in our DLife community online, which I mentioned. So, few more interesting things which I would like to know is, uh, uh, what was your reaction, your family's reaction to this change dietary approach? I mean, did they
I
not
mean,
like? I mean,
listen,
were they not
they
afraid that you're going on a low carb diet, you're going towards carnivorous diet? How is it?
no, they didn't have any issue. They were glad because they saw that I was feeling better, looking better, and they actually like my cooking.
And what's
So,
interesting to know is about meat. I mean, see, usually, at least in India, I can tell you that whenever people come across any disease or if they're diagnosed, especially heart attack, the first thing they are told to get off is meat, fish, eggs. So, how is it that you took up with such a scare of cholesterol? It
I
was a
don't
brave
worry about.
decision.
I think again we have the mistake that they're not looking at. You know, the most important marker, and this is my opinion, uh, is the triglyceride to HDL ratio of your cholesterol. It is not the LDL. In fact, if you do a low carb diet, you're going to have an increase in LDL because, again, the work of another smart, very smart young man and engineer, the
Feldman,
great
Dave
David
Feldman.
Feldman of cholesterolcode.com, you there's an energy hypothesis for LDL cholesterol. And it goes
And
like this.
energy transport.
Yes, it's energy trans. It's like, think about it logically. Blood is aqueous, means it's dissolves in water. Glucose is aqueous, but glycerol, fat, is not aqueous. It will not dissolve in water. So it needs a transporter in the blood to get to wherever, to the liver and to other places where energy is required. And so LDL cholesterol becomes like, and it was kidding the way Dave says, it becomes like the Uber of energy transport, the taxi. And so you're going to have this resulting of increase in your LDL. Now, the thing that you want to be looking out for that Dave points out is, what is your level of very low density lipoproteins? That's important. If that's high, that means there's a lot of junk, a lot of waste that could be blocking, lending itself to the inflammatory processes that lead to blocking your arteries. The most important thing, getting back to the triglyceride to HDL ratio, is you want to get that ratio ideally to 1 or under 2, because it's been documented. The studies are there. If you have a trig to HDL ratio of less than 2, you are unlikely in a state of cardiovascular disease. That was basically the conclusion of the studies there. But if you're over 2, you have active cardiovascular disease process. Now, when I had my heart attack and I still have my labs, my trig to HDL ratio was like, I believe it was like 6. It was very high. And once I started the diet and everything, I've kept it under 2. I've got it as low as 1.3, 1.4, but it's usually around 1.6. But the point is, it's under 2. And I unfortunately belong to that group of people genetically predisposed to low HDL. I've actually been supplementing with niacin, 500 milligrams of niacin now for several years, and that has done 2 things. That now raised my HDL a little bit. I won't go up to 1,000, and it also lowered my LPA
LPA.
lipoprotein, yeah. But 500 milligrams nice in a day works fine for me. So, you know, I'm very much on top of my healthcare and checking my labs and doing my metabolics. And so just, you know, this isn't rocket science. All you have to do is just take an active interest. And again, the part of the diet, it can be a lot of fun because, you know, cooking is actually, instead of a chore, it can be a pleasure. You know, for me, it's a time when I can start to think, and I look at recipes now and I think, how can I create a low carb version of this particular recipe? And I've discovered great foods to replace things that I, you know, would have enjoyed. So that's, you know, it can be done.
And I think you touched upon a very important point, that is a triglyceride to HDL ratio. In fact, in the medical community, there is a term called as atherogenic dyslipidemia, where the
Yeah.
TG is very high, HDL is low, and these are associated with what is called as an increased small dense LDL. So this is something which is not usually measured. So people just go by the LDL and total cholesterol, but the small dense LDL, which is atherogenic, is actually associated with this TG to HDL ratio. So in effect, if this is not addressed at all, this becomes one of the crucial factor which is being totally ignored. And then by far the studies have proven that the biggest risk factor possibly for heart disease could be insulin resistance. It is as per all the studies, if we really see, insulin resistance tops everything, and LDL is just, it is just a pathetic, it comes in the last. And in fact, the other factors like even smoking and all comes ahead. And as you rightly said about Dave Feldman, in one of these videos also he will explain the extensive database of Enhance, the database in US, where again he has seen that it is those who have, if those who have high LDL may be living long. It is probably the triglyceride to HDL ratio which is affecting. And this is the same thing which is always echoed even by David Diamond. So these guys are just great in really analyzing all the data properly. So this is something which you have brought up very nice. So I'm just curious to know what exactly is an issue with the hospital food. I know you just said that terribly carby. It is something surprising. Sometimes I see the photographs from your from the Western countries. It is sometimes filled with processed food. Now let me tell
All processed food.
processed food.
This horrible, you know, quote unquote whole wheat bread with cereal, skim milk, and you know, orange juice. And I'm like, you're giving this to a diabetic? And you know, I have, and I keep. There is a textbook. I save this to show people how the food companies have kind of like, what are they? Who are they kidding? There is a textbook from an agricultural college from New Hampshire, that's from like 1903 or whatever, and it discusses from Hampshire College in England. I apologize, and it talks about how to fatten pigs and livestock with cereal and skim milk. Now, I ask myself logically, if this is the diet to fatten livestock, why are they selling it to me as the diet for me to lose weight? It's crazy. So, you know, and this is what they were feeding. And I was like scratching my head and I was like, come on. I had to like ask my family to like bring me nuts or a can of salmon or, you know, just like, you know, something, you know, that was actually healthy. And I was also upset that they did nothing, that they left me in a totally hyperglycemic state. Because when I looked at the labs, I was still hyperglycemic regardless. And my A1C at admission to the ER was 7. And here they tell you, the American Diabetes, that 7 is the goal. Come
Perfectly
on. The goal should be, if you have type 2 diabetes, your goal should be a normal A1C. And it can be done through a low carb diet.
It is
It
really
is possible.
surprising. Yeah. You also told that you managed A1C of 6. And let me tell you, any doctor will congratulate you for having an A1C of 6 or 7. I mean, AAC can go up to even 8 or 8.5. It's just terrible and almost double of what we believe. And probably we should be having something like less than 5.6 or so. In fact, more closer to 5 or
Yeah,
below
no,
5 is
my
what.
A1C last measurement was 5.1. I've had it go as low as 4.5 whenever it was a lot, but I've averaged around 5.1, which is fine, which is good.
Perfectly fine. See, even I manage on the same level. 4.7 to 5.1 is the max. I don't go above 5.1 at any given point of time. So that is how it goes.
Yeah.
And see what could be the wrong, what could be wrong with all these policies? Why? I mean, even after so much evidence is coming in, if we really see, there are thousands and thousands of studies. See, I realize that there are certain industries which are actually which will be affected, and even food industries to a great part will be affected if such nutritional changes are being brought about. But I realize that in Western countries, the average household, their dependence upon processed food or packaged food is very high, unlike in India. In India, we still prepare home cooked food. Let me tell you, the dependence on processed food is still less. But nevertheless, our food could be high in carb. But nevertheless, when we see what's happening in US or UK, the amount of food they store for the entire month, it is just terrible.
Yeah. Well, it's, the whole issue with food. Well, this whole, I think this brings a contextual issue. And it goes, this is sort of where my opinion and my thought about it. It goes down to kind of a spiritual and moral uh, existential challenge that we have as human beings. Uh, Human beings don't like to admit that they're wrong or they've made mistakes, especially if you are a human being who has authority over others, or an officer or a member of the government or whatever, because there are consequences when you're wrong. But also at the same time, um, we have to learn that we don't have all the answers. We need to be able to be more humble to say this is the best information we have, and this is the recommendations that we are making based upon that information, and that these are the risks if you go past that. And unfortunately, another consequence out of this is economies are based upon these decisions. And if those decisions are wrong decisions, those economies are affected as well. And, Newton's law about we wanted, inertia, there's a resistance to change, you know? This is why when Dr. Atkins was challenging orthodoxy, they were saying he was crazy, he was a quack, all of these other things, because God forbid, what if Dr. Atkins was right? And I assert he was correct. Rest in peace. Um, he was correct. And he's not the only one. His legacy, and I think this is more an evolutionary process, we learn from our mistakes. We're learning from our mistakes in everything. And we've made mistakes with diet. We have a global obesity crisis. We've made mistakes with COVID, and we're learning from that as well. Again, and I know I bring this up also, I know because India is in the throes of a very severe wave. Whatever you do, it is critical to achieve some level of metabolic health. What is metabolic health? Normal weight, normal blood sugars, normal blood pressure. If you are not achieving this and you become infected with COVID, the odds are against you. The odds are likely you will have a severe case of it. You will be severely impacted by it, and your chances of dying are substantially higher. So it is important that you do all the things that you can to play the odds in your favor. And you do have control over your food. You can do things nutritionally. Hopefully there will be more vaccines and vaccinations getting to the countries like India. I am fully vaccinated. I had my second Moderna shot on on April 8th. And I didn't have any bad experiences with it. And the other thing you can do is make sure you get sun, you get sleep, you do things to help your immune system. Vitamin D is very important. And there's things that you can do. And I hope you will do, because this whole challenge with COVID is a global challenge. And we ultimately are all in this together, because even if one country is able to get control of it, until it's under control all around the world, it's going to be a problem, because we are a global community, not just a local community. So
That's true, very much. And just to sum it up for the viewers, yeah, Tony had an heart attack. He was a diabetic, and with a low carb, keto, and a carnivorous approach, he has managed to get his A1C to 5.1, stop the progression of cardiac disease. His CT calcium score is not progressing or reduced slightly. He has managed to control his disease. He has managed to control insulin resistance. He has managed to control his atherogenic lipids. He has managed to control his calcium scoring progression, and through all the associated diseases, he's managed to do it very well. So Tony, it's very inspiring story, and he has taken up a carnivorous approach, which is little unthinkable, at least in this part of the country. When people
I
get heart
understand.
attack, people get heart attack, the first thing they're advised, and they themselves do it, is get off meat, fish, eggs. I mean, it is just surprising. And what they're going to replace it, they're going to replace it with more carbohydrate and more blood sugar raising food. So ultimately, and Tony has managed to manage his
It,
disease. Yeah.
it begs the question, why would you take an approach if you have a disease of carbohydrate intolerance or carbohydrate malfunctioning metabolism? Why would you choose to eat a diet that continues the insult on your body?
But
You
this is because we do not understand that carbohydrate has a blood sugar raising property. We just see food as food, that's all. The common perception is every food will raise blood sugar, that's all. So that ignorance persists, and it's only through sessions like this, getting guests like you, that we are able to understand it better. So Tony, what is your view about India and its metabolic syndrome status?
Well, the data that I have seen shows, unfortunately, India, like many other countries, is obese. So there, again, go back to there's too much energy. Think of it that way. There's too much energy being stored. And when you have too much energy, you either have to kind of cut down on your intake of that energy, or you have to change your sources of that energy so that it's not creating the malfunctioning that you're experiencing it. And you should be least open to determining ways that you could achieve that. And again, with respect to religious preferences, it is possible to be a vegetarian and low carb. And I even am aware of some ketogenic vegetarians, although that's very challenging. It's much easier, like I said, for me, like this morning for breakfast, I had 2 eggs fried in olive oil with a cup of coffee. And, I'm good till tonight. And tonight I'm gonna have some type of barbecue or something like that, and a glass of wine. I enjoy a glass of red wine from time to time with my dinner. So, you have to figure out and determine what makes sense for you. But it is possible, and you do not have to be a victim to this condition. You can have control over it, and keep the dragon in in the cage, and not able to breathe fire on you. He'll be there, and if you don't keep your guard, he'll remind you. If you slip, all it takes is you slipping into your diet. Oh, yeah, I'm doing great. No, but don't fool. It's kind of like your engine, like a car engine, operates and functions a certain way. Understand it, know it, respect it, honor it, and give it the correct nutrition. So,
very rightly said, Tony.
Yeah.
And your point really touched the critical point that we suffer from what is called as energy toxicity, overload of
Yes.
energy. Energy toxicity is the word which we need to understand and stop stuffing ourselves with excess energy. And Indian way of doing low carb, ketogenic, vegetarian or semi-vegetarian is possible, and many of us are doing. In fact, Tony, you will be surprised to know that my aunt, who is almost now 80, she is doing what is called as a vegetarian keto, and just chucked off seven pills in the nearest dustbin, and she's just on one tablet of metformin, and all perfectly controlled. You can
Wonderful.
imagine.
Those are the inspiring stories. I mean, I wanted to just talk about creativity and development, where this is going. Now we have the continuous glucose monitor,
Yeah.
which I have. I use the Abbott Freestyle, but there will be a day when we will have a type of device where
Maybe not.
but I use this to measure sleep, blood pressure, heart rate, all of those things. I track all of these things, which you should do too, because it's so important to get that good night's sleep. It's good to know when you're stressed. It's good to know if your blood pressure goes up, does it come down quickly when things calm down? Those are the kinds of things. But where I see discovery and innovation going is to where metabolically there will come a point where there'll be a device that will be able to tell you, you have reached your metabolic caloric threshold today to maintain your weight, or you've reached the point so that gee, I don't need to eat anymore after this if I want to stay in this to stay at my current weight. There will also be a device not just to measure glucose, but most importantly, how much insulin is your pancreas putting out in order to achieve homeostasis of the glucose in your body. So this is this is what's on the frontiers of discovery, and probably I would imagine within the next 10 years technology come up, because the demand for it is coming. We need these types of devices so we can better manage this condition.
In fact, there are devices coming out where you can measure insulin at home. Yeah, that it is on the anvil. And the CGM which you mentioned, Abbott is also developing what is called as continuous ketone monitoring device also. So they are going to launch it in some time. They have already done some study. This study is also recently released. So a lot of interesting thing is coming. Interesting devices are coming in the space where we are operating. So whether it is continuous glucose monitoring, continuous ketone monitoring, or even home testing for serum insulin is going to be released shortly. I think there are a few companies who are actually on it, and probably is going to be released shortly. So Tony, it was very interesting chatting with you. I'm one of the most happiest person to really chat with you after a long time. And Tony, what I'll do is I'll just open up for question and answer session from all the participants here.
Sure.
So I have unmuted everyone so people can ask question. So there's a question from Sneha Gupta. Does a person have any legal recourse as far as hospitals are concerned regarding high carb food that the hospital furnish their patient with. Has any patient taken a legal standpoint on this issue? What she's meaning is, in your country, has anyone taken them to court?
Well, you have to look at the respective laws that apply to your country. So in the United States, the regulation of hospitals is done both at a local level and in some respects, a federal level. In the state of New York, there was legislation passed that allows for patients now to have foods of their choices or their dietary preferences be respected when they're admitted as patients. So there has been some change in that. So that is something relatively new. But this is something that needs to be brought up with the local hospitals and local officials. But it definitely, in my experience, it was a very disconcerting problem.
I think this is little tricky thing because the mainstream nutrition advice still depends upon the high carb food. So getting it changed to some low carb food is going to be a real challenge unless we get it from our home, which again could be a little difficult.
Well, you know, the food industry knows at some level that they're part of the problem. And so they have to become part of the solution. And they've been developing products to do that. But unfortunately, the profit model is in ultra processed foods.
Junk.
And as long as the main driver is how can we get as many consumers to consume our product repeatedly without regard for the consequences to their long-term health. You know, we've created, unfortunately, a nation and a world of food addicts. There's all kinds of food addictions as a result. And that's also very unfortunate. We also need to look at things like going back to what worked, which was, you know, the local community farms and honoring the role of the farmer in the community. In the United States, we've lost that. Now, for example, I try as much as I can on the meat that I consume. I try to get locally sourced meats because the quality is better. And because I'm not eating 3 times a day, every day, my budget allows me to spend a little bit more for a higher quality product that I can get fresh, as opposed to being in a package.
Fine, thank you. So any more question? Yeah, there's one more question coming in. Which device you're using to track your sleep? Which device are you using to track your sleep, stress, and intake? There's a question.
Oh, there are lots of devices, a Fitbit, Apple Watch. There's so many devices now that are out there. This one, I don't know, cost me maybe $30. And to me, this watch is more important to me than a fancier watch that I could be wearing. So I'm wondering when the fancy brands are going to start to put out the really high tech devices, because having real-time information is great. Shot at that moment, I have data now of the last 72 hours I can show. And the doctor's like, oh, okay, yeah, your blood pressure went up, but when you're sleeping, it's down to normal, or it went up, but it went right back down. Were you having a stressful moment? I goes, yeah, I was running, I was at the gym, I was doing this, or I got into an argument, or all the things that will affect your stress. Oh, and also remember, my friends, as type 2 diabetics, it is so important to manage our stress because our blood sugar levels are related to our stress levels, no question. Higher cortisol, higher glucose levels. So it's so important to learn to relax and to get a really good night's sleep.
So there's a compliment to you from Subhadra. Superb presentation with very valuable messages inspired by your passion. There's one
Thank
more.
you.
There's one more. Thanks a lot for your valuable experience, which reminds me of the same incidence of heart attack happened to my father in 2016. Since then, we are both type 2 diabetic and following a low carb keto. Very inspiring. Yeah, Praveen. Yeah, so Praveen is one of our members of D Life. In fact, he has gone ahead and he has put his father, who was supposed to be, an angio patient, supposed to be done an angioplasty. He has went ahead and applied low carb ketogenic diet and is doing perfectly well. And so also is Praveen. So I mean, it's a family of low carbers. They're doing extremely well. So then,
That's
thanks for.
wonderful. I'm really congratulations. You know, one other thing we have to change is we have to get doctors back studying metabolic and therapeutic nutrition, which they don't really study in medical school. It's too much pharmacology and not enough nutrition. And again, that's something that has to be brought up really at the local level. So like in the United States, the practice of medicine is regulated by the individual states, and the license to practice medicine is regulated by the individual states. So we have, it all has to be done at the local level. We're getting a question from Subhadra saying, how often can I use the continuous glucose monitor? It's continuous, so you get real-time information.
So for your information, Subhadra, this device, you can use it for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you have to discard it and then use a fresh one. So there is absolutely
And what
no
you do
issue.
is you alternate arms.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks on one arm and then 2 weeks on another, and you alternate.
And this depends upon how much we can afford. Affordability would be a factor in India, yes. So if you can afford, go ahead and use it.
I'm looking forward to the day when the device manufacturers realize that the market is so substantial that the scales, the economy of scales, you could get this thing to be so affordable because so many people would use it. Imagine if you put a country, an entire country, on CGMs, and they got to see what was going to happen in their blood sugars after they eat some of the foods that these people eat, or the combination of foods. So it's like someone asks me, so do you don't eat at McDonald's? I go, in a jam, I'll eat at McDonald's. What will I eat? I would eat a quarter pounder with no bun and only the onions or lettuce and the cheese, and that's it. I won't mix it with French fries. I mean, the most disastrous food combination is high fat, high carb, guaranteed to it's too much energy in one seating. And I tell people why diabetics ultimately die from their conditions is well, if your A1C stays high, try to imagine your blood having the viscosity of honey. How does oxygen get to your fingertips and to your toes if it can't circulate? And your kidneys, which is one of the most remarkable organs, just like the liver, all organs, but the kidney is an incredible organ. And it's designed to clean out toxins. So yes, you've got a sugar overload. Your kidneys can absolutely do it once, twice, but over and over and over, you're going to blow out your kidneys. Thus, you'll get what happens. You get renal failure, the diabetics. The eyesight, again, back to my circulation example, diabetic retinopathy and blindness. Listen, if blood and oxygen cannot get to the most remote parts of your cells and in your body, you're not going to have healthy, very delicate, sensitive organs like the retina. And this is why it's critical. If you're type 2 diabetic, you've got to do everything you can to achieve a normal blood sugar through the diet with the assistance of medication if you require it. but your goal should be, if you're type 2, to come off all your medications and manage it through your diet. And it is possible.
Thanks. Thank you, Tony. So, any more questions? Or we can wind up. That doesn't seem to be any more questions. Yeah. So Tony, thanks a lot for inspiring from Asim Gupta. So Asim is our poster boy who has managed to reverse his getting diabetes under remission in a very, very short period of time. We just had a podcast with him some time back. So thanks, Asim.
Mhm.
So Anup, you like to say something?
Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
So
Thank you very much, Anup. Thank you, all my friends. I look forward to meeting with you in person and dining with you in your beautiful country someday.
So on behalf of India, on behalf of D Life, I would like to thank you, Tony, for sparing your time, and that too, you're on traveling right now. You're not in your home country, your home state. You're traveling, and you really managed to find time to address us. And with your very unique approach, you have actually shown that. So even if it is a critical disorder like let us say heart disorder, you have managed to reverse everything. You have managed to reverse your diabetes. I thank you once again.
I'd like to give
Yeah.
my website,
Yeah.
which is www. And I'll put it in the chat as well, acmartinez2.com. And if you want to email me, you can email me at, I'll give a Gmail. So look forward to staying in touch with you, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again in the future, and we'll finally get a chance to meet Shashi.
Thanks, Tony. And for all our viewers and listeners, you can connect to you can connect to Tony Martinez in Twitter as well as in the Facebook.
Oh yeah, I'll put my Twitter.
Yeah.
I'll put my Twitter up there too.
He keeps putting a lot of interesting stuff in Facebook and Twitter.
Thank you. I hope I pronounced this correctly. Sneh Gupta.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Tony. Thank you once again.
Okay. All right. Till we meet again, my friend.
Thank you.